Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker. I'd like to introduce to you to provide education partnership program overview and early childhood, Gwen Merrick, the Associate Executive Director for the Manitoba First Nation Education Resource Centre. Please help me welcome Gwen.
I have a PowerPoint, so Shalene, my colleague, will be putting that on while I start my presentation. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to stand here and speak with you. I'm honored to celebrate the work that has been done. And I especially honor those women who did this work. Sorry. And Shalene is making a whole bunch of noise, which is fine. I want to honor Sheila Murdoch for all the work she did. She did everything she was supposed to do. What we envisioned, she made happen. And she didn't do that alone, of course. She did that with the staff that she chose to work with, and all of you. Because our work would be nothing without you. The ones that implement those programs, the ones that go to work every day and do the work of a practitioner. And I'm especially happy that we hired early childhood people to do this work, because you brought something to the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Centre that wasn't there before. And your title of your conference is so fitting, because that's what you brought to the center. Looking at education from the eyes of a child. So many times as educators trained in the university, we become so immersed in academics, we forget about the rest of that child. We forget about the physical, the emotional, the spiritual well-being of a child. And that's what you brought to our organization, to remind us that our work is not just in the head, it's in the heart as well. And we do have people who have overcome that focus on academia and in the intellectual part. I remember, it's very close to me, because when I left university after having finished my master's degree, I thought I was going crazy. And my brother, who's a very blunt person, Russell Kirkness, said to me one time, I was talking and he said, he didn't say it in a nice way, I'm gonna leave out some of the words he used. I have to carry around a thesaurus to talk to you, he said to me, but not in a nice way. He woke me up, and I realized that I needed healing from that experience. Because when I do something, I immerse myself, I get crazy about it. And so I had to go from my head to my heart. And that was a long journey. So I'm thankful that you're already there. And you don't have to go through all the healing. Because I think, although I haven't taken early childhood training, it must be different. Because when I talk with Sheila, and a lot of times I don't get to talk to the staff because they're so busy. I don't want to be bothering them all the time. So I sort of pick on the managers. And when I talk with Sheila, I can see that what you do is very different. How you think about education is very different than what I was taught. But because I made that journey from the head to the heart, I understand what you're doing, and I support what you're doing. So I was very honored when they asked me to give a snapshot of the work that has been accomplished. We have to celebrate our success. A lot of times at the MFNERC, we don't celebrate our success or talk about our success enough. We're humble. And we're taught to be humble. We're told to be humble. We're not to go around bragging. But you know, sometimes we have to share that success and pat ourselves on the back as a community. And so what I'm sharing is your success as well, not just the staff at the center. All of you that have been involved in this program and will continue to be involved in this program. We want to celebrate the work that has happened. We want to celebrate our success. I lost my partner. The Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center Education Partnership Program is a national program. When that program sunsets, it's not that they're against early childhood or early years or early learning, whatever you want to call it. It's not that. This program is a national program, and each region chose what they intended as their priorities for that program when we sent in our proposals. I don't even know nationally, I haven't heard people talk that much, whether other regions focused on early learning. So they haven't cut early learning. The program sunsetted. And that's standard in First Nations education, and I can say lots about that, but I'm not going to because I like Derek Bradley. Just joking, Derek. I have been through this many times. I've worked in education for over 40 years, and I've been through this. And yes, it's difficult, but we'll survive and we'll thrive and we'll continue on and we'll continue to build. I don't believe in giving up. That isn't in my vocabulary. So we will continue on with Healthy Child Manitoba. We were doing it before this program, and we'll do it again. We'll continue on. We prioritized early learning, the Wapasqua Virtual High School, private home placement research at the request of the chiefs of Manitoba. And we also focused on Manitoba First Nations education systems development. That is what we proposed to at the national level for funding for Manitoba. Those initiatives were based on the needs expressed in First Nations in 1998. It took us 15 years to address all the needs by using the funding in creative ways and in ways that followed the guidelines, of course, We always have guidelines to follow, but we tried to do it in a way that we could meet all the criteria, but at the same time address the needs in First Nations. I'll skip over the next one because Lauren spoke about that, and go right into early learning programs, because that's our focus today. We have it in categories. One of the categories was positive partnerships. And in that category, we had PACS, EDI, and Welcome to Kindergarten. This is a snapshot, so I'm not doing everything we did. Next one. PACS, the Good Behavior Game, is in our communities and totally funded by Healthy Child Manitoba. And I hope I don't make any mistakes. Sometimes I hear wrong, but I think that's what happened. The initial, recently we had initial evaluations results, and it indicates that PACS prevents or reduces mental health challenges at an early age and promotes well-being. PACS is in 33 Aboriginal schools. 53 teachers, first Aboriginal teachers, received training and are working with PACS. 1,080 Aboriginal children are benefiting from PACS. So we've made great strides forward, and I got the stats from the Healthy Child Manitoba website. So it's Aboriginal, which means First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. But we have PACS happening in our First Nations. There's a video on their website that's I think most of the video is around OCN, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, and they participate in a video, and it's very good. So I would, but then I talk on there too, so I'm promoting it. I feel kind of bad about that.
And she talks really good on it too.
The programs that we partner with Healthy Child Manitoba, we look at them very carefully and see if they're culturally appropriate to the degree possible, because programs that are developed are evidence-based, you can't change that program very much, because in fact you probably can't even change it at all, because what is happening in those programs is what is successful. So I always hope that we can develop programs specifically for First Nations, and yes, we've started with in a small way, but I hope that can happen. But in the meantime, we take mainstream programs and look at them and see if they'd be appropriate in a First Nation for First Nations children, and these the PACS is very good. I see a lot of the things they do in how our grandparents raised us. So and I'm fortunate that I was raised in that era where grandparents and parents were very good grandparents and parents. So I always feel fortunate that they still practice the old ways of raising children, and so I can see in these programs a lot of times our old ways of how we raise children, taken of course to the modern times. The Education Development Instrument is a questionnaire that measures kindergarten children's readiness for school across several areas of child development. We have implemented this, and the staff of the early learning programs at the center have used this EDI in a creative way. early learning is not really discussed that much in First Nations. These ladies that went out there were the first that, well, they have daycares and, I forget what the other one is, help me. Head Start. But early learning programs were basically non-existent in First Nations unless the First Nation found a way of doing it on their own, of course. So this EDI process where they work with the kindergarten children and on about where their development is, they took that data and they used it to begin dialogue on early learning, and that I thought was really a good way, because a lot of times you need something concrete to talk about, because our people really don't like to talk about airy-fairy things. I always remember taking a university course, and it was education philosophy, and I felt like I should have a bottle of vodka sitting beside me. And that class, I felt silly talking about the things we were talking about, and that's what I mean. We need something concrete to talk about, something important, something that has meaning that we can see. And so that EDI has encouraged dialogue about early learning. In 2015, 33, I put 57, I'm silly, that's 57 schools, 48 First Nations. 33 of the 48 First Nations have committed this year to using the EDI. In 2011, only 13 First Nation schools participated. So these ladies have made great strides in a very short period of time. And this data will help develop programs and will help us as well to convince the government that indeed these programs are effective for First Nations children. We also purchased Welcome to Kindergarten, and the training is continuing. The other category is Roots of Success. And that's Roots of Empathy and Seeds of Empathy. They are both evidence-based programs. Roots of Empathy is for K-8, and it's proven effective in reducing levels of aggression amongst school children by raising social emotional competence. So often when we talk about bullying and people being mean to each other and children being mean to each other, and we start making all these rules and regulations and laws, and in the end, we never deal with the child. And so this program gets the children to become empathetic. And you know it works. My great-grandson, we took him downtown to the MTS Center to play hockey. He's 8 years old. And when they were leaving, my husband said that there was this homeless person. And my grandson said to my husband, his great-grandfather, he said to him, "Papa, I don't want to come downtown anymore." He said, "Why, my boy?" "Because there was a man, he has no home. He was cold and there were tears in his eyes. I don't want to come down here anymore." He had empathy at 8 years old. He had empathy for another human being. He didn't look down on that person. He just, it bothered him. And of course my husband talked with him after, but just the same, like he was in Roots of Empathy in Louis Riel School Division. So it's so important. These programs are important, and we begin to see it as these children get older, that indeed it affects them in a good way. In 2008, there have been 142 instructors trained from 36 First Nations. That's really good. That's excellent. MFNERC hosted annual networking forums. We found at MFNERC that networking forums are really important. These types of things, it gets you out of your school and talk to each other. Don't just hang around people you know from your own community. I know it's hard. I have difficulty doing that. But go and talk with other people and network and find out what they're doing, and maybe you can get some ideas, or you can give them some ideas, because we're in this together. And so this is a form of networking as well. Seeds of Empathy. It's developed for 3 to 4-year-olds with emphasis on literacy development. We trained a total of 216 early childhood educators in 29 First Nations. And approximately 750 children have received SOE programming. Tremendous amount of work. The last one I'm going to talk about is family literacy. This is a model for how to develop frameworks, how to develop curriculum. And they followed all the steps that they're supposed to follow, and I honor them for that, our staff. And they took their time, but they didn't take too long. They didn't take forever. They took a standard period of time to develop the framework, the curriculum for this. They did a family literacy preliminary needs survey, and there were 32 respondents. That's so important to do that. We can't be developing curriculum that people don't want, that's going to go sit on a shelf. And so they did this survey to see, they then had, they did a report on effective practices. They also formed a family literacy working group. That working group was involved in developing that framework. They then developed a First Nation family literacy curriculum guide, and it's currently being piloted in 4 First Nations. And what's interesting about this, they developed a curriculum that was general enough and flexible enough that each of those 4 First Nations who have no money to implement those programs found a way of doing it in their own way. So they found staff that are already fully employed and gave them extra work, which is par for the course in First Nations. But they've managed to find a person to lead the process. They are following the general curriculum, but it's flexible enough that they were able to deliver in their own way. And that's so important, because our communities, our First Nations, are so diverse. And so this is a lesson for everyone who is going to be developing curriculum frameworks. And as they develop, of course, as they do the pilot and they evaluate what is happening, that program will become stronger. So it's being piloted in Kisikuinen First Nation, Matthias Kalam First Nation or Pakatawagan, Cross Lake First Nation or Pimitsikamak, Sapatawia Cree Nation. So 2 north, 2 south, that's what we always do. We always make sure we do north, south, and if possible, we try to do the 4 directions, but we don't always have the money to do that. So this is just a snapshot of the work that has occurred since 2009 to now with the early learning practitioners. We are very proud of the work they've done, and we're very thankful for the work they've done, and we will continue. In fact, at this moment, we have a Chief Nelson Houle from Ebb and Flow, and Charles Cochran, one of our staff. They're meeting with the Minister of AANDC, promoting or advocating on behalf of early learning, as well as the Wapascua Virtual High School, which is another area, of course, that has been very successful. So I applaud you and we'll continue to advocate on behalf of the children, as we always do. And I know there are people. We have people like Derek Bradley in AANDC who cares about our children, and they do also do their best to advocate on our behalf as well. But within a big bureaucracy and a big government like that, it's very difficult to make progress, but we try our best. And so I applaud you in your work. I'm so happy to see the babies. They bring that sacredness to this place. And don't worry if they make a little bit of a fuss, but they're sure quiet babies. So I want to thank you, and Sheila, I did my best. Ekosani, thank you.